They bestride the world, thronging the halls of Congress, running giant corporations, meeting and greeting at powwows in Switzerland. I speak of the species known as the straight white male, the most unopposed of the world's peoples. They are feared, envied, occasionally attacked, and derided. But pitied, not so much. This is a quote by New York Times reviewer Charles Isherwood about the November 2014 production of Straight White Man. Today I want to discuss with you some of the critical reception of Straight White Male, Straight White Men, and then pose some questions that we can discuss as a class about the play. To prepare for the speech and the dialogue, what I did was consult approximately 15 reviews of the plays, and then I used those reviews to formulate the questions that we can discuss. I thought 3 reviews were particularly thought-provoking. One from the New York Times, one from the Columbus Underground, and then the third from TorontoNow.com. The most high-profile production of Straight White Men to date was the November 2014 production at the Public Theater in New York. And the Public Theater is probably one of the most respected not-for-profit professional theaters in New York. Charles Isherwood, writing for the New York Times, gave the November 2014 production a favorable review. He complimented young Gene Lee for surprising the audience, stating, "The play is not a full frontal assault on the beings of the title," in other words, the straight white men. He goes on to note that Miss Lee's fascinating play goes far beyond cheap satire, ultimately becoming a compassionate and stimulating exploration of one man's existential crisis. Believe it or not, Isherwood comments, Ms. Lee wants us to sympathize with the inexpressible anguish of her protagonist, a middle-aged, upper-middle-class, straight white man named Matt, who has failed to follow the codes of achievement that he's been expected to conform to. So, one key question that I'm interested in, raised by Isherwood's review, is how effectively does he create this sympathy for the straight white male characters? A review in the Columbus Underground raises other concerns. Lisa Much covered the September 2014 production of Straight White Men at the Wexner Center of Performing Arts in Columbus, Ohio. This production, approximately 2 months before the one at the Public Theater, was actually the world premiere of the play. She gave the play a mixed review. For Ms. Much, the play centered around this central question. What would happen if people lost their greatest privilege? Not thinking about their privilege. She viewed this as an important question, and she found the plot clever and provocative. But Ms. Much criticized the play as being merely, quote, a thought experiment, unquote. And she thought that because Ms. Lee refused to provide direct answers to the source of the character of Matt's difficulties. And she also refused to determine what it was that he was going to do about it. Okay? I fail to see the purpose, she states. Who would completely renounce privilege if it did not ensure equality for all? If society did not change because of one man's choice to make it through his own means, completely ignoring his race, sex, orientation, religious affiliation, and nationality, why would he do this? So, within the dynamics of straight male white privilege, Lisa Much articulates the important question centered to the play. Why would someone with significant privileges give them up? The final reviewer I want to discuss had other questions and concerns. Glenn Sumi is the reviewer for New Toronto, NowToronto.com. And he covered the June 2015 production at Fleck Dance Center in Toronto, Canada. This was the first major production of Straight White Men since the New York production, the off-Broadway production. Sumi also gave Straight White Men more of a mixed review, in my opinion. First, he praised the play as skillful and funny in bringing up lots of questions about how to navigate, with appropriate sensitivity, various minefields of identity politics. He enjoyed how the three brothers play around, high-five, brag, boast, bond, and gently humiliate each other. The kind of things he's got as straight bros do, even literal ones tend to do. He also appreciated how Lee, with the character of Matt's breakdown, quote, suddenly provides the opportunities for some genuine self-examination. The sticky point for Sumi, however, was credibility. He said, I don't really believe these characters. I don't believe that a group of straight white men approaching middle age would know, for instance, alternative lyrics to the musical Oklahoma. I don't believe that the certain information that comes out in the play wouldn't have already been known by these characters. I don't believe the four men would eat a pie without plates. Whatever, frat boys? End quote. Sumi raises the question of believability in the story and with the characters. So now, having heard three opinions of the play, Straight White Men, from the reviewers, I'd like to turn now to your thoughts on the questions that were raised. Okay. Charles Isherwood raised the question of sympathy. How successful, in your opinion, was young Jean Lee in creating sympathy for her straight white male characters?
I think that she did a really great job at creating sympathy, especially for Matt, and then seeing how different he was from his brothers, and seeing sort of what society wants us to be like Jake, like that's what they want, and then Matt, and then sort of like comparing and contrasting, and how it really did make me sympathize for him.
I feel like a great way they were able to make you like sympathize or at least empathize with the characters was the fact that they were aware of their privilege and they like discussed it. And so as opposed to like if they had been ignorant about their privilege, you probably would be like, I don't care what happens to you, you're like, or at least not as much. So I think using that, like, it helps you empathize with them further.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the major things within it was with the sympathy is like what the other two people said, like it's like she painted a picture of this type of guy for Matt, and then like it's like in those times when you watch those movies, those cringe moments where you're just like, this either this has happened to me before, or I would hate to see this happen to myself or to someone around me.
Yeah.
So it's like those little moments you're like,
Yeah.
like it's not what you want for the character. You want them to do well. No matter if you don't particularly enjoy them, you want them to succeed.
Actually, I love the idea of the cringe moment because it seems like part of what young Jean Lee is doing is to kind of create this kind of discomfort from time to time throughout the play. Lisa Mudge raised the question of privilege. Why, in your opinion, would someone with privileges give them up? Jen?
Guilt, like just classic like white guilt. Like if you're like raised to believe like, oh, like our ancestors or people like us, like for a similar genetic history have done these horrible things, you wouldn't really want to identify with that. Like you can even look at that right now. What was the woman who like identified as black for like 10 years? She didn't like the white community. She preferred the African American community, so she chose to identify as that, even though that wasn't her culture to like identify with. So like by turning away from this identity that you don't really like, enjoy, identify with, etc., like he wanted to turn his back on that, so maybe he'd be a less maybe not less privileged, but like I don't know, I feel like it helps his conscience, like if he identified as something else.
makes me think a lot about this, like, not necessarily dealing with, like, white privilege, but, like, other types of majorities and minorities within the world. Like, specifically with religion. Being a Christian, there may be some negative connotations that come along with it because of the past and about even the present of stuff going on. And it's just some of those things. Like, recently I saw a video from BuzzFeed, and it's like, I'm a Christian, but I'm not. Like, it's just basically went over, like, I may be a Christian, but I believe in marriage equality or stuff like that. So it's just like, it makes me think about not just only, like, the white privilege, because everything that was said is very true, but it makes me think more about what other things can you put into that privilege, not necessarily dealing with race.
I just think that the idea of giving up privilege is really interesting, because I mean I don't know, it's I don't know, that concept is kind of, it's odd to me, but it's interesting because sometimes it does happen. One of the times that I've seen it commented that people are giving up their privilege is when those who are transgender transition. It happened to Caitlyn Jenner, where when she transitioned, like she made some kind of comment that was like, now that I'm in a woman's body, everything I do comes second to what I'm wearing. So, and like there's even comments on like Jimmy Fallon that now that she is in a woman's body, all the media is focused on is how she looks at any given moment, what she's wearing, and so which if she was in a man's body, it would be different. So just the idea of giving up privilege is it's such a concept to grasp. I don't know if I could like wrap my head around it.
Yeah, and I think that's what Lisa Munch is saying as well, is that it seems like she's saying that Young Jean Lee takes some steps in raising the interesting kind of questions, and it maybe doesn't go quite far enough in terms of her kind of really teasing out the implications of that. Glenn Sumi, the third question, raises doubts about the credibility of the characters. How believable, in your opinion, were the characters in the play? Sarah?
That was the one that said something about like eating pie without plates. My family would totally do that. I think that's believable.
What I believe was a night where they all yelled at each other, and then like a minute later they all came and got drunk and then went to bed. Like that was believable to me.
I definitely felt like there was something slightly off about it, like something unnatural. I don't know what it was when I was reading it, but I was like, people acting like this. I guess I don't have brothers, but maybe it's just because it is a play and it's a written script.
Yeah. I am the only daughter in a house full of guys, and I could totally see like all of those things happening. Like my little brother's like helpless. I saw him trying to make a Tostino's pizza once with like plastic still on it. So like I could totally see them just like grabbing like a handful of like pie or something and like taking up to like the room. I've seen my brothers take like pans of brownies just like up to their rooms. So like I feel like it was very stereotypical, like masculinity, like that hegemonic masculinity we've been talking about. Like, oh, they're men, they're gonna wrestle, they're gonna eat food only with their hands. You know, it was very stereotypical. But like when you're like painting like this portrait of like straight white men, like they're both so stereotypical in some ways, like with this masculinity. But then they're so unstereotypical when they're like one of the few white men who are willing to understand their privilege and. Like, they're willing to talk about one of them crying, or they're not willing to cry in front of each other, like that type of deal, even though it was seen as somewhat unusual.
Oh, and it just makes me wonder if the point of the play was to make them, like, believable. Because they are the stereotypical men. Because if you think of men in real life, they're all really different. Like, my brother, my dad, they're both not very... I don't consider them. My dad does all the laundry, he does all the cooking, does all the dishes. And then my brother's very passive-aggressive when it comes to things. He's not aggressive. He usually gets back at you when you least expect it. But It's just the idea of the play, I think, may not be that they should be. Like, it's just to point out that these are the stereotypes. This is the extreme of the extreme, and let's see what happens when something happens that is not part of the extreme.
Then along with that, like making it like, you know, as like making it so believable, because like right when the dad walked in and talked about how he wasn't dusting a Santa, you know, one of the brothers was like, "But Dad," so I think it kind of shows like, try to picture them like this is their teens, and white privilege that really has stuck with them and hasn't let them into their 40s. That's how I kind of see that.
Yeah, the one thing I would say that was the most, like, oh, I hope I didn't turn this off. Okay, the thing that was the most, like, non-believable was the fact that they were middle-aged and they were, like, wrestling and everything. But it was, like, it was funny, like, as a concept to think about that. But then I kind of thought to my dad and his two brothers and how they act, and I was like, oh my god, they are the exact same people as these brothers.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe without as much of like the wrestling and stuff, but just the attitude, I think it's definitely like exaggerated to some extent, and it's definitely to some points a satire, but I think it's interesting that there's little pieces of truth that we can pick out of that yeah.
I love that point about it's exactly what they would do.
Yeah.
That's what I did my dad and his brothers too.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you for this short dialogue. My purpose or my goal today was to think about some of the critical reception of straight white men. And to do so, I looked at an article from the New York Times, from Columbus Underground, and TorontoNow.com. I think that there are many admirable things about Young Jeannie's play. Some of the important ones, I think, are the questions that it raises about unexpected sympathy, about the dynamics of privilege, and the credibility of the story. Young Jean Lee is a playwright that I hope you will continue to take notice of. As Zachary Stewart of TheaterMania.com states, we should be grateful that Lee keeps challenging herself as an artist, pushing beyond the notions of writing what you know. In doing so, her work never fails to challenge and inspire. Thank you.
Thank you.